Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar where we will be reviewing the revisions to the local area disclosures for 2025. We will be recording this session and it will go up on our YouTube channel. Please keep in mind that we will not be taking questions in the Q&A or the chat, but questions will be addressed by emailing prostans@nsdcrealtors.com, which Fred will go over and review with you at the end of the presentation. So we welcome you, and we just wanted to let you know that I am Dana Moore. I am the Vice President of Broker Relations. And Jennifer?
I am Jennifer Soto, Director of Professional Standards, and thank you for attending today's webinar.
And we will hand it over to Fred. We respect your time and want to get going on time. So welcome.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. I can't see everyone, but I understand that you're there. My name is Fred Pfister. I am the General Counsel for NSDCAR, the North County Realtors, and I'm here to talk to you about an exciting update. You've been asking for it. People have been wanting this update, and it's an update to the 2025 local area disclosures. And so without further ado, I'm gonna start with a presentation today to tell you a little bit about how this came about and how to use this form, and what is new, what's different. And so let's start it up. So here's obviously our title to this broker forum. We're going to talk about the local area disclosures and specifically what brokers and office managers need to know. This is intended as a broker forum, as an event so internally, in terms of your risk management, in terms of counseling your agents, what you need to know in order to have your agents use this form, and so that you're able to go back to them and say, hey, there's a new form. Hey, this is how you use it. This should be part of your best practice. So first, I'm going to give you my shameless plug of who I am. Just for those of you who don't know me, I work in agent and broker defense. Here's essentially most of my bio from our marketing people. I just want you to know that I defend agents and brokers. That's a core part of my practice. It has been since I became an attorney. And for those of you who know White and Bright, it's been a core practice for our firm for the last 40 years. And the issue that we're always looking for is how to protect an agent and broker from getting sued. And this form plays into that. And so I will talk to you here about what topics I'm going to cover today, so that you can follow along and see what we're going to be discussing, or I'm going to be discussing today. First, I'm going to go into essentially the purpose of the local area of disclosures. Why do we even have this form? Why does San Diego need a form like this? I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of the LID, how this came about, the role of the working groups. I want you to know that this is a joint effort, not only by the North San Diego County Realtors, but also with PSAR, Pacific Southwest Association. Then we're going to go into overview, the meat of this, an overview of what we did in this LAD revision. And then we're going to talk about the key structural changes, expanded sections, essentially what's new, what's been revised, as somewhat of a high-level overview. I know that you'll want to dig into those sections, and certainly it's important to do that. Then we're going to talk about implementation. How do you actually use this form? How do you add it to zip forms? How do you use it in your brokerage? And the best practices for that. And then lastly, I want to talk about acknowledgments. Who was part of these working groups, who to thank. And if you do have that question and answer, if you do have follow-up, we certainly welcome it. The association's always trying to be better. We're always trying to add additional information and show you how to do that for 2026 and beyond. Okay, so just jumping in, because I want to respect all of your time. What is the purpose of the LID? Why does this really exist? And And because you're thinking, well, gosh, the CAR, they have so many disclosure forms. California is, the book on disclosure forms and the book of forms that you actually use or approved. I mean, it's almost like 400 pages long. Why do we need an additional form? Why do we need one for San Diego County? Well, this really came about, and what the purpose of it is that if you look at those forms, and the main form is the SBSA, the statewide buyer and seller advisory. That's really the main statewide form. It's really statewide, right? It talks about things. California is an extremely diverse state. There's lots of issues that are unique in different areas of the state. And the brokers and agents in San Diego County for many years now have know that San Diego County is very specific. We have beaches, we have desert, we have mountains, we have the border, we have lots of different things that they just don't have in LA, or they might not have in Sacramento. And so being a San Diego County specific was important, so that people know when they look at this form, when they use it, that they're looking at issues that are unique to our area. This is also the purpose of this is also to assist with identifying issues for buyers. What do we mean by that? Well, if you're using this form with your clients, and you're walking them through, you can walk them through this the same way you might the SBSA, because obviously some of these issues are going to apply. If you're selling a home in Fallbrook, you're going to be talking about septic and wildfires, right? If you're selling a home down in Imperial Beach, you might be talking about the border and the beach, right? And so the purpose of this form is to be able to use. It's obviously an optional form, but it's to help the agents identify issues with buyers, and give them another source to, hey, this is a region specific one. This isn't your generic California form. This is region specific. We're also here to enhance the transparency and risk reduction. Of course, what we're always looking for, especially as brokers, especially as agents, is protecting our buyers, our sellers, and ourselves in these types of transactions, right? The last thing you want is to sell a home and then have a claim afterwards, hey, you didn't tell me about this, or I wasn't aware of that. Well, this is another form that can be used to say, hey, yeah, we actually did talk about wildfires. Yeah, I know that there are 2 other CAR forms, but here's another specific form that was specific to San Diego. We're also, we're always looking at ensuring compliance with Civil Code 1102. And your disclosure obligations. They're extensive. I understand it. I mean, we litigate those, we address those issues every day. And so, this form is another tool in your tool belt to comply with that civil code, and making sure that you're disclosing all the facts, all the issues that have a material impact on the value or desirability of the home that you're selling. And lastly, what is the purpose of this? It's to promote uniformity. We have 2 realtor associations that use this form across San Diego County, and both of them are countywide, right? And it's promoting that uniformity with respect to those associations, and making sure that in all transactions in San Diego County, they have the opportunity to use a single form. So I want to go into the history a little bit of how this LAD came about. Some of you who knew that there was a previous LAD that goes back many years. When CRMLS came about, and the realtor associations were no longer all working together on the same MLS. There was a joint effort between NSDCR and PSAR to create an LAD that could be used countywide. And that joint effort started in before COVID, actually before we were even using Zoom, right? It started back in, I believe it was 2018, 2019 timeframe. And a an LAD was a comprehensive LAD was issued at that time, developed by with working groups. So working groups from both associations for the initial LAD. There have been revisions over the last couple of years, but people were asking for a new revision, right? New things have come up. One of the things I'm going to talk about is battery storage, right? Was that even on anyone's radar 5 years ago? It wasn't on my radar. I'll tell you that. But now it's become an issue, and so this form really came about by, hey, we need another revision. The last major revision, I believe, was in 2022 or 2023, and so with these working groups from both associations, they looked at this, they worked on it, legal counsel worked on it, and came up with a major, what I would call a major revision of the form, not only in substance, additional sections, but also revisions of existing sections. So, this form is probably about 50% new from any last form you used. We also, one of the other things that this working group was looking at was consolidating overlapping city and county disclosures. I get that everyone kind of has their issue that is very hyper specific to their area, but we're also looking city and county wide, right? It's one of those. It's a tension of you can't have everything in this form, or it would be probably 150 pages, and people wouldn't even look at it even if they had the opportunity because it's just too long. And so one of the things that the working group was looking at is, let's consolidate, right? Let's try to get these city and county disclosures specific to San Diego County, specific to our cities, but make them a little bit more general for our county. I know that sounds maybe that contradicts. Well, wait a second, we want to be very specific. Well, we try to be specific, but we also try to be a little bit general for the county. So I talked a little bit about the working groups, but just to give you a little bit more flavor here, these working groups, like I said, were NSDCR and PSAR, and these were high-level brokers who have been leaders in the association for many years, and they conducted a comprehensive comparative analysis of looking at, okay, what are the issues that are coming up in our transactions. They also consulted, the CAR forms to try to see, well, is there any overlap? Let's try to avoid redundancy, but at other times, let's emphasize a point, right? How many wildfire disclosures can you have, right? Well, to some extent, let's have as many as we can, right? Because that's such a major issue for a lot of people. To let you know that this was vetted by that panel. For the practical implementation or application in transactions, they took a look at what comes up in our transactions, what are the issues that are important to our clients, and I think that is the key to this, making sure that this has real world application. And of course, legal counsel got involved. That includes me. And looking at this form, making sure that it complied with our obligations, making sure that there was buyer acknowledgement language for defensibility. You certainly, one thing to give the form to somebody, it's another one to have them sign it saying that they read it. And also we wanted to add disclaimers protecting agents from non-verifiable third-party data, right? This form has a number of links to third-party data. It refers people to places. Agents aren't going to be verifying that information necessarily, right? If it's coming from the county of San Diego, you might not have personal knowledge, right? We're relying on third-party experts. Those of you who have seen my other presentations on risk management know that that's one of the key things I always talk about. Rely on third-party experts. Well, some of these disclosures are are third-party experts, right? The county, I would rely upon the county, right? But I'm not verifying it, right? I'm not going to the county necessarily and asking them, hey, what the information you put out there is true, right? Wink, wink. You're not lying to us. That's not the job of the agent, right? The job of the agent is is directing them to the source. And then, final approval of this form was coordinated through the risk management and the form committees. Okay, let's get to the meat of this. What prompted this update? What's an overview of the LID revision? Well, again, it reflects new and modified local conditions since the last time there was a major update. I talked already about the battery storage, but there's other issues, right? ADU ordinances, defensible space rules, the new hazard maps, with respect to wildfires. There was essentially new information that we needed to get into this form. Again, we incorporated feedback. We solicited brokers, transaction coordinators, attorneys. There was a lot that went into this. And really the goal at the end of the day was to make this more readable. You may look at this form and say, hey, wait, there could be further revisions. We can make this more readable. Well, yes, I always agree. We could always tweak any form. And certainly we welcome your comments, your questions, and we will, and certainly the working group attorneys will look at that for 2026 and beyond. We can always make this better. The goal is to protect you. And so we also wanted to make this, obviously uniform across the county so that you could use this in Chula Vista, you could use this in Fallbrook, you could use this in Alpine, and you could use this in Encinitas or La Jolla, right? This form is intended to be used throughout San Diego County. So some of the key structural changes is we removed some of the excess language. There were a number of instances where it says, please be advised. It was a little wordy. Let's put it that way. The previous versions were a little wordy. We tried to remove some of that excess language to make this easier for a buyer, but also the seller to digest, right? That these are the issues that are important in San Diego County. We also revised the introduction, highlight this disclaimer that the brokers are not verifying inspection results. This mirrors some of the CAR forms, but it's also making sure that the buyer knows that they should rely on consultants and that they should investigate, particularly before releasing contingencies. That's a major issue here, right? Is when you're using this form or using any type of disclosure form, it's talking about these issues before you release those contingencies, because after you release contingencies, it gets much, much harder, right? It's much more difficult to say, oh, wait a second, maybe I should have looked at that before I released my inspection contingency. Or I released my loan contingency and now I find out that I can't actually qualify anymore because the insurance costs are too high. So the key here is having that introduction, talking about that introduction with your clients to make sure that they know that all these items should be investigated prior to the release of that contingency. In addition, the next item is we expanded the countywide disclosures and environmental disclosures. There's just more concerns. As those of you who have been around a while know that the forms 20 years ago were half as many as they are now. We're getting more and more forms. There's more and more issues. That's kind of the nature of real estate, the way it's been going. So we tried to expand the countywide disclosures and environmental, but also reduce the region-specific issues. And you might be thinking, well, why would you do that, right? Well, the region-specific issues, everyone has kind of their narrow, hyper-local focus. But some of those issues also might be apparent in another location. And to avoid the possibility of, well, we have a beach condition, right? Well, we could have 30 disclosures on every single beach in San Diego County, but the form again would be 100 pages long if we had 30 different beach disclosures. So one of the issues we were trying to do here was consolidate into making it San Diego County, but also making it less hyper-local. So let's talk about some of the expanded sections. These are essentially some highlights for you here. So in terms of the countywide disclosures, we emphasize proposed developments. This is becoming a major concern for many residents, particularly the upzoning. I know a number of you have had cases, or not cases, but I've had the cases. You've had transactions where there's a concern about, well, but this might be a transit-oriented development area, or there might be, additional units that can be added to this, or you're going to have an apartment building next to you. And so making the proposed development a more expansive, and also providing links to relevant websites, was very important to the working committee. And so that section has been expanded. In addition, the zoning change section has been expanded. This could be seen as somewhat duplicative of the SBSA, and this just as a broad level, this form works with the SBSA. It's not a replacement for it. It works with it, right? The statewide buyer-seller advisory is very important, right? And this works with it, but this talks about zoning changes specifically in San Diego County. The homeowners associations, this was expanded, not just the current risks of your existing homeowners association, but the fact that there are formation risks with new developments, right? You might be buying in, or your client might be buying into a new development and not knowing that, or not familiar with homeowners associations, and that they might be buying into a proposed homeowner association, or a homeowner association that doesn't have a lot of history. And so that was important to be added. The private transfer and lifestyle fees, this was revised as well. Now, there is and this to some extent explains that CAR form, which is the notice of transfer fee, the NTF form, which essentially is, hey, there's a private transfer, a lifestyle fee that comes with this property. And so this was, previously what we had it kind of in the hyper local section. Well, this was more of the, okay, there might be fees in different locations, right? They might be new, right? There might be a new development that has one of these fees. And so trying to make it a broader county-wide disclosure, and to kind of explain what that NTF form would be when it comes in the form. Public attractions, those always change, right? You get new places like Front Wave Arena. You get the attractions. Petco Park is certainly, those of you who live downtown certainly know that they've greatly expanded what they do, their concerts, their events. And so there was a call to expand our public attractions section to encompass as many of the new disclosures there. Illegal encampments and in homelessness. This was expanded really to emphasize the transient nature of this, that you might have an illegal encampment, you might have a homelessness issue one day, it might move somewhere else the next day, and to let people know that it's inherently transient, right? And it might pop up, it might expand, it might decrease. I mean, it really is a moving target to some extent. But to expand that issue, because it has become important to a lot of owners, not just in downtown, but all over the county, honestly. Transit. We consolidated a lot of the transit. In the past, transit was in a number of different disclosures. Well, living next to a trolley, living next to a train, living next to rapid buses, these are all parts of transit. And so there was a call to consolidate that issue. Quarry operations, again, that used to be hyper local. There's a quarry here, there's a quarry there. Now it's more of a general disclosure that that there are certain quarries, they have impacts. You should be aware of those if you're buying near a quarry. What's new, right? What's new in the countywide disclosures? Well, certainly insurance considerations. This has become a big issue. It's frankly, it's statewide, but it's certainly in San Diego County. We want to emphasize this issue. Now, again, statewide, they emphasize this issue, but we're at the risk of repeating ourselves here. it's extremely important. And so we thought it would be important to include here that, have the conversation. This should be a conversation from the beginning of any transaction, particularly if you're in a high fire risk area, that insurance is expensive or unavailable, or it could be one, both, right? And so having that disclosure early in the transaction before the release of contingencies, it's one of those issues that I couldn't emphasize enough if I was in a transaction and representing a buyer. ADUs. So ADUs were kind of split. We addressed this twice actually, because there's really two different issues from two different buyer profiles, if you will. One profile is, can I build one? Right? I want to increase my I want to be able to increase my revenue on this property, or I'm intending this to be a rental or a development project. And so there's always people who want to build them, right? And so there's a disclosure in here about the, that the availability, that's something that should be investigated, right? Can you build? What can you build? Is it possible? So that was important to disclose. The other half of that, though, is the other buyer profile who doesn't like ADUs and doesn't want to live next to, a project that has, 10 ADUs next to them, or doesn't want to have the parking impacts, essentially the environmental concerns, the nuisance of it, right? I mean, how many homeowners have you heard who said, well, they put an ADU next to me and I can't park anymore on my street and they're partying all night? Well, that's the kind of thing you might want to know if you're buying that home next to, that large ADU project. So looking at it from those two different perspectives, there's two different disclosures about ADUs, essentially, can I build one? And what are the problems that might be associated with ADUs in the neighborhood that I'm looking to buy into, or that someone might build in the future, right? That's also part of it, is that, hey, there might not be an ADU next to you now, but there could be one in the future, and you should be aware of that. Unpermitted work and additions. Again, this is another issue that I see it all the time. You may see it in your transactions that, particularly with some of these older homes, they might have done work or additions or alterations that are unpermitted. The statewide has a disclosure on this. We wanted to emphasize it here and expand on that, right? And make sure people know that is an issue that they should consider, right? No home is perfect. Utilities. So we split these into and expanded on these, particularly, here's just a couple of them: septic, cell towers, natural gas, connections to utilities. These are all issues that can impact the home, right? You might not have cell coverage. You might be buying a home without cell coverage. You might have a septic issue. There might be a natural gas pipeline. You might not have connections to utilities, or it might be very expensive to get them. And so having those disclosures expanded was, again, important to the working group, and I think is important to emphasize with your clients. Residential and commercial development. This is another reminder to check locally, right? The previous disclosure on this was really looking at the county-wide. Well, this is emphasizing, your local, right? It's not just, what does the general plan say? It's also, what's going on in your neighborhood, right? On your street that you're buying on. And so making sure that people, are looking at that. In terms of environmental, what's new in environmental? Well, wildfire, hazard zones, and defensible space. Obviously there is two disclosures already, two major disclosures from CAR on these issues, both in the SBSA and the WFDA. They go into even greater detail than this form does. But again, it's part of having the conversation, right? That this is so important. I mean, you could have, you don't even have to be out in Valley Center to have this issue. This issue could be in with tract homes on a canyon, right? It could be in San Diego, in the city of San Diego, something that you might consider an urban area. And so the this issue I don't think can be emphasized enough. And so it's now expanded and it's new in here. The next one is nuisance and noise. This is kind of a general disclosure regarding nuisance, that there might that that your neighborhood may have characteristics that you're not used to. I think is kind of a way to explain it. And I think where this comes from, I'll just tell you about my personal practice, is I'm getting more and more claims, and we have over the last couple of years, that that they're just a general nuisance in the neighborhood, right? That there are general conditions in the neighborhood, or it's noisy, that people who maybe have lived in a different location aren't used to, right? They're not used to maybe this urban environment, or what they thought was a suburban environment, but they find out that it's noisier than they thought. And so this is more of a general disclosure that we thought was important to include in the environmental. Short-term rental and tourists. This kind of goes into that ADU issue to some extent, but it also is, this is an issue that's been front and center for a lot of different locations, particularly by the beach, but it really could be anywhere in San Diego County where you have a number of short-term rentals, your Airbnbs, your VBROs, your vacation rentals, and it's a different class of user, right? It's different than it might be different than your typical neighborhood, and to make sure that people are aware of this, that they could be buying into an area that has a short-term rental, or that there's no restriction on people doing that. And so having that conversation is, we thought, important. And of course, battery storage. Again, I highlighted this issue earlier. But you've probably seen the people with the signs, the protests, the people who don't want it, and the risks of fire. I mean, we've had already a fire down in South County that went on, I believe, for days, with battery storage. And so I think it's important to have this, that not only are there existing battery storage, there may be new ones that come in. And what does that mean for you and your home, right? What does that mean for disclosure? What does that mean for your risk profile, right? To have something that is difficult to extinguish once it's with a fire, and which also could expand into the neighboring community. That's a disclosure that I think should be out there. And then once we get out of the county-wide disclosure and the environmental, I talked a little bit about that we reduced some of the disclosures by region. And again, this was kind of the hyper local, is that, we have the way this form is set up is we have county-wide disclosures, we have environmental disclosures, and then we have this, what I would call the more hyper local, or disclosures by region. And you'll notice in this 2025 form, we actually reduced some of the information here, mostly so that we didn't miss something. It's very, again, we could have a form with every hyper local issue, but we tried to transfer as much, or the working group tried to transfer as much to the county-wide disclosures, so that we're not missing out on something, because you'd hate to have a disclosure that was specific to South County, which also might be in North County, but it's only in the South County section, right? And so someone who's buying in Carlsbad might say, well, that doesn't apply to me. Well, it might, right? And so that's why, in terms of, we expanded the county-wide disclosures. What's new, however, we did add a couple of items that we enhanced, right? At the same time we're consolidating things, we also highlighted at least 3 items that have become a bigger issue. And one of those is Rose Canyon, the fault zone. Those of you who know that area, it kind of expands from La Jolla, actually comes down into Mission Bay a little bit, with the fault zone, not exactly Rose Canyon, but the fault actually comes down, and it's impacted what people can build. It's particularly for developers. It has impacts to people, and so identifying that, there are new maps that have come out, and it's an important disclosure, I think. Particularly, I've seen several transactions where that has really come into play. The next item is impacts of the California-Mexico border. I'm not going to go into any politics here. I don't think anybody wants me to, but certainly the California-Mexico border has changed, and it's an impact. Certainly with the border enforcement and just the impacts. Those of you who are in South County who have seen the sewage impacts, for instance, on the coast, know that there are some significant issues with the California-Mexico border that remain in flux and are that should be an issue that is front and center for a lot of people who are buying down there, that they're aware of it. I mean, you might think, well, how could they not know, right? But having the disclosure certainly helps, that they're aware that there could be impacts from the border, and it's a changing situation. I think that's also an important thing, that what's there today and what the impacts are today may not be the same in 3 years, right? Or a year from now, or a month from now. And so that's a new expanded disclosure. Outdoor lighting, you might think, well, what on earth is this? This is really an impact on the rural areas, where there are lighting ordinances, dark sky ordinances, and so putting that disclosure in here it is important for people who who are going to be purchasing in that area. Okay, so we have our form. You all can read it. You can download it. What should you do with this form? Well, you can use this form immediately. It's been available for, I think, approximately a month, but it's certainly available now. And it's intended to be used for all new listings and transactions in San Diego County. Certainly, I know that it's an optional form, and it's not required essentially by CAR, but it's one of those situations where can you ever over disclose, right? If you're representing a seller, can you over disclose? To some extent, for coming from an attorney, I think you probably can't. And so having this form in your tool belt, I think, is important, and letting you know that you can use it now. I wouldn't mix with the old form, right? So if you're doing a transaction now, you're doing a transaction in 2026, don't mix the forms, don't use the old form, replace it if it's already in your zip forms, or it's already in your practice at your brokerage. Make sure to replace it. Make sure you're using the new form. Don't use the outdated form. Next thing is encourage the buyer to review this. I mean, this is a form, if you're going to be using this, which we hope you do. This is something that should be delivered early in the transaction, not when they're signing the disclosures, but early, as early in the listing process, early in the transaction, so that they're looking at these issues before releasing contingencies. If I were using this form, I wouldn't supply it with a DocuSign at the time of hey, we have to release our contingencies. This form's included. Here it is. Sign it today. Right? I would be providing this form early in the process so that they have an opportunity to read through the pages, ask questions, get the information. Because what this form is really intended to do is for someone to look at this form and say, hey, and review it and say, well, these are issues. Wait, I need some time before I release my contingencies to investigate this issue, because you know what? ADUs are really important to me. I want to build one, right? And so I need the time to investigate that with my professional, with my outside consultant, perhaps, to make sure that I can do that, because that's really important to my transaction. Well, if they get that information the day they were releasing contingencies or an hour before, do they have opportunity to do that? Probably not, right? And so encouraging them to review this early, I think, is a great best practice. In addition, you'll notice that this form has a signature block for both buyer and seller, right? And so the intent is that the buyer signs this, the seller is acknowledging receipt of it and signing it as well. And then you keep a copy of this in your transaction file, right? To demonstrate that you had compliance. Will this form, keep you out of every single lawsuit? Of course not, right? No form will, right? Every lawsuit or every claim or every problem with the transaction is often very fact specific. But this is yet another form, another argument you have, another best practice that you have to demonstrate that you are going above and beyond what needs to be done so that you're demonstrating compliance. You're not getting, and your client is fully informed, right? Everyone wants to have a happy transaction, have a client who knows what they're getting, right? No house is perfect, right? Okay, well, how do brokers and agents use this form? Well, you can add this form to your zip forms in your broker account, and kind of here are the steps that you would go to NSDCR. They have this form linked on the website. You can save this form essentially as a PDF directly from the website. Then you go to your home screen. You click import. This is within zip forms. You click on browse for a file, you find where you save this form. And then you select the file, you open it, and it's now added to your zip forms, right? And you want to do this for your brokerage account. And this is why it's important for brokerages, so that it becomes part of the office forms for all your agents, right? If you rely on your agents to do this, they may or may not do it, right? Having agents, in their own best practice, having every single one do this, it may be a challenge. So I'm encouraging the brokers to do it, having it part of the agent's profile, and then going to your agents, telling them about this form, going back to them, showing them how to use this form, incorporating it as part of your risk management and practice with your next broker meeting or next office meeting, I should say. And saying, hey, we got a new form. This is how you use it. This is when you use it. This is how you get it from zip forms, and incorporating that as part of your practice. If you have questions on how to add this to zip forms or how to use this in your practice, by all means, please contact your association. The number is below. They will, you can call that number. They will walk you through it, and make sure that you're able to do it. That's certainly a service that the association provides, and they're more than happy to do it. They want you to use this form. They spend a lot of time, energy, money, create this form, and certainly want it to be implemented in your practice the best way they possibly can. And lastly, I want to talk about acknowledging the contributors, the people who worked so hard on this, and where the follow-up is. Certainly the contributors, just so that you know, from North County, these are some of your past presidents here, some directors who have worked long and hard, not only on this project, but through, for years, many years, working to make your Realtor Association the best one in San Diego and in the state of California. And so I certainly want to recognize Chris Hasvold, Pete Belaine, Bill Hayes, Nancy Lane, and Bill Richard. They did an excellent job working, unpaid hours to make sure that this form is is usable, is updated, and is ready for release. And so certainly want to thank them. On the PSAR side, their CEO, Rich Discoli, had a major impact on this, and certainly want to thank him and know that the eyes of PSAR were all over this, and this was a joint effort. This is not just a North County effort, and certainly thank PSAR for their assistance, their expertise, and their review of these forms. And last but not least, I would remiss if I didn't thank Jennifer Soto. She's the director of Pro Standards at North County, and she and her team did an excellent job shepherding this to completion, adding input, and did a tremendous job to revise this form so that it's in a again, a form that you can use, and that has the eyes of the associations on it to protect you. And lastly, if you do have comments and revisions on this form, which I certainly understand, right? As I mentioned from the beginning, and as Dana mentioned, this form can always be revised, and we welcome your comments. This was a collaborative effort, just so that you all know. And so if you do have comments, you do have questions, or you do have revisions for 2026 and beyond, because we update this form yearly, and not a major revision every single year, but certainly revisions. Please email nsdcrealtors.com. There's the link, or the email address, I should say. We welcome it. We want this to be collaborative. We want your input. You guys are the people on the ground who are dealing with these transactions, and so it should have your input, frankly. What's important to you. So please feel free to do that. And the working groups will consider that. Staff association will look at that, and attorneys will look at that to see if we can make this even better going forward. And so again, I want to thank you all for participating today, and look forward to using this form. And here's the additional contact information. And thank you again for all your work to represent this, to represent the association in all your transactions and represent your clients.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. This session will be recorded and placed on our YouTube channel. Any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to prostands@nsdcrealtors.com. Thank you for your time. Thank you for staying all the way through the end. We appreciate each and every one of you. And as usual, if you would like to reach out to me, you can reach me at dana@nsdcrealtors.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.